Do you think you already understand Rei from Alice in Borderland? Well, if you think she's just the cold strategist we see on the surface, get ready to take a slap of reality right in the face. What nobody tells you is that every restrained smile, every calculated glance, carries fears, traumas, and vulnerabilities that shape her every move. And the craziest part, those same weaknesses are the secret weapon that make her almost unbeatable. Today, we're going to dive deep into her mind, discover what truly makes her human, and who knows, maybe learn something that even the dystopian world of the series doesn't reveal. If you're a fan of cinema psychology and want to understand the mind behind your favorite character, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any video. Where in the world are you watching this video from right now? Leave your answer in the comments. Rei, at first glance, seems like a distant, almost enigmatic figure, the kind of person who observes more than she speaks. She doesn't easily get carried away by emotions on the surface, but anyone who looks closely can sense something pulsing underneath. She's like that friend who always has a quick answer but no one really knows what they feel. And maybe it's that mysterious aura that makes everyone feel both attracted and intimidated by her at the same time. Have you ever met someone like that, who seems impossible to decipher? Behind her controlled appearance, there's a sharp, calculating mind, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Every move she makes seems to have a purpose. Every glance carries a hidden intention. It's like playing chess with someone who never reveals their strategy, but you can feel that every piece is about to move. This cleverness isn't just natural. It's a defense, a shield she built over time to avoid getting hurt. Isn't it fascinating how some people use intelligence as emotional armor? Despite her apparent coldness, there are moments when small behavioral slips reveal her humanity. An almost involuntary smile, a lingering look at someone specific, things that seem insignificant but speak volumes. That's when we realize that Rei isn't just the strategic mind everyone sees. She's also vulnerable, human, with desires and fears. And it's exactly this duality that keeps everyone on edge, because you never know which version will appear. Isn't it fascinating how complexity can make someone so magnetic? She moves through the world with a mix of calm and tension, as if every step were calculated to balance power and perception. You can feel that she's always analyzing her surroundings, assessing allies, possible threats, and opportunities. It's as if every situation were a test, a way to measure not just others but herself, and that constant evaluation creates an aura of both respect and fear. Have you noticed how people like that can dominate a room without raising their voice? Curiously, this mysterious posture also works as a natural filter. Not everyone gets close to her. Not everyone deserves to. She chooses her battles and her company with almost surgical care. It's almost as if she's always training others to see who truly stands firm when the pressure rises. This selective ability is one of the reasons she stays ahead, always one step ahead of the game. Can you imagine living like that? Always testing everyone around you. Even in her determination, it's clear there's a silent loneliness that follows her. It's not a painful loneliness, but the kind that comes from knowing that few people truly understand you. Rei lives with that isolation gracefully, but beneath the surface, there's always the tension of being alone among many. That loneliness, however, doesn't weaken her. On the contrary, it makes her more resilient, more observant, and more strategic. Have you ever felt how loneliness can make you more attentive to the world around you? Her relationship with power is subtle but constant. She doesn't need to impose authority through shouting or exaggerated gestures. The mere fact that she exists in a room already changes the dynamic. Every decision, every movement she makes carries weight because she deeply understands the consequences of her actions. It's almost as if she's playing a game of silent influence, where every word spoken and every gesture is calculated. And that mastery creates an aura of respect that few can question. Have you noticed how some people dominate situations just by the way they are? And finally, Rei is a walking paradox. Distant but magnetic, cold yet incredibly human, strategic but vulnerable. This mix is what makes her fascinating and unpredictable. Looking at her is like watching a river, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, always hiding depths few can explore. And it's precisely that mystery that keeps us hooked, that makes us want to understand more, but never fully unravel her. Do you feel that curiosity that pulls you in without realizing it? Rei's past is like a silent shadow that follows her every move. It's not something she carries with pride, but it shaped the way she sees the world and the people around her. Every strategic decision we see on the surface has roots in old wounds, experiences that left deep scars. It's as if every hardship had been an uninvited lesson, teaching her the importance of always being prepared. Have you ever noticed how invisible wounds can be the foundation of surprising strength? Growing up in a hostile or unpredictable environment left marks that seeped into her personality almost imperceptibly. She learned early that trusting blindly could be dangerous, and that every gesture of kindness could come with a price. That constant vigilance shaped her cautious behavior, almost mechanical in some situations. But beneath that wall, there's an intense desire for connection that shows only in rare moments. Isn't it curious how trauma can both protect and isolate someone? Rei also carries a sense of early responsibility, that pressure of constantly having to prove herself. She became a strategist before fully understanding her own emotions. This need for control often makes her seem distant, cold, or unreachable. But in reality, it's an attempt to protect herself from repeated pain. It's impressive how some people turn their wounds into skills that others admire. Have you ever had to become an adult too soon because of circumstances you didn't choose? An essential part of her trauma is tied to chronic distrust. Every new person who crosses her path is assessed with a gaze that allows no mistakes. This distrust isn't arrogance. It's self-preservation, a lesson learned the hard way. She knows that poorly managed vulnerability can be exploited in devastating ways. And paradoxically, that caution often leads others to underestimate her, thinking she's merely cold without realizing the depth of her experience. Another mark of her story is loss. Losses that could have been avoided or that happened beyond her control left lasting impressions. Those losses taught her the importance of anticipating problems, of always thinking ahead. But they also left her with that constant feeling that nothing is permanent, that everything can change in an instant. Isn't it incredible how some losses make us stronger, but also more cautious about who we let close? The impact of trauma also appears in how she deals with internal conflict. Rei doesn't act on impulse. Every reaction is measured, almost studied, to ensure there are no flaws. This generates continuous inner tension, a silent battle between instinct and strategy. And it's this inner fight that, in a way, keeps everyone at a distance, because no one wants to get involved with someone who seems to evaluate every detail. Can you imagine the pressure of living like that, always calculating every step? Despite everything, those traumas don't completely define her. They only shape her perspective and choices. She learned to use every scar as a tool, every pain as a warning not to repeat mistakes. It's a kind of silent strength, almost invisible to those who don't know her story. And it's this ability to turn suffering into strategy that makes her so fascinating. Have you noticed how some people can turn their pain into secret weapons without anyone realizing it? And looking from the outside, we see Rei navigating her world cautiously, but with impressive emotional intelligence. She knows her limits, her vulnerabilities, and yet manages to use those experiences to survive and win. This combination of pain, learning, and strategic skill is what makes her unique. But like every complex story, this is only the beginning of her conflicts, and we barely know what's coming next. Rei doesn't connect easily with others, and that's not out of arrogance but survival. Every friendship, every alliance is evaluated with surgical precision before being allowed. She learned early that trusting can be dangerous, so she keeps an almost invisible distance, as if there were a barrier between her and the world. And yet, at the right moments, she can form deep bonds that reveal unexpected humanity. Have you noticed how some people seem untouchable, but open up only to those who truly deserve it? This caution creates constant inner conflicts. She longs to connect, to feel supported, but at the same time fears that any closeness could be used against her. That duality creates silent tension that appears in small, everyday interactions. It's as if every conversation were a test, every gesture a riddle to decipher. And this not only shapes her relationships, but also influences how she perceives and interprets those around her. Isn't it curious how fear and desire can walk side by side? Among allies and rivals, Rei must navigate with extreme social skill. She observes, analyzes, and identifies behavioral patterns, anticipating reactions and intentions. This ability is an incredible advantage, but also an emotional burden because every misjudgment can have serious consequences. And as she learns to deal with those challenges, the viewer realizes her social choices are both a defense and a power play. Have you ever felt like you had to read everyone before exposing yourself? Attachment is another point of tension. Rei knows that getting too close can lead to vulnerability but can't completely erase the need for connection. This internal conflict shows in small hesitations, looks that last longer than they should, and moments of silence that say more than words. It's in that delicate balance between closeness and distance that her complexity resides. Have you noticed how some people master the art of getting close and pulling away? Family relationships, or the lack of them, also weigh on her decisions. What she lived through at home or in her previous life directly influences whom she chooses to trust. Many times, old patterns of abandonment or manipulation repeat subtly, shaping her emotional responses. And even if she tries to escape those cycles, they remain silent, reminding us that our past experiences always follow us. Isn't it impressive how those invisible roots can guide our choices without us realizing it? In moments of pressure, her interpersonal relationships become a psychological battlefield. Every ally is a strategic resource, every rival a threat to be calculated. And while the world around her seems unpredictable, Rei tries to maintain internal logic so she doesn't lose herself emotionally. That constant need to balance reason and emotion creates tension not only for her, but also for those close to her. Can you imagine the exhaustion that causes over time? There's also the issue of selective empathy. She feels, perceives, and understands others' emotions, but carefully chooses when to act on them. This ability is a double-edged sword. It allows her to manipulate situations in her favor, but also carries the guilt of not being able to help everyone. It's a constant dilemma between survival and humanity that makes us reflect on how far we can go strategically without losing our essence. Have you ever thought about how often we need to make hard choices like that? And finally, we see that this interpersonal conflict isn't just about external interactions. It's also about the relationship with herself. Rei must reconcile the need for closeness with the fear of getting hurt, creating an endless cycle of evaluation, testing, and adaptation. Every friendship, every social choice carries lessons from the past and challenges from the present. And this ability to balance emotion and strategy will be essential for the conflicts yet to come. Every decision Rei makes seems simple on the surface, but carries layers of intention and vulnerability. She weighs risks, analyzes consequences, and even then, some choices expose her human side. It's like watching someone play chess, but knowing that every piece moved also reveals something about who they are inside. And it's exactly in that tension between strength and fragility that we perceive her complexity. Have you noticed how seemingly small decisions can say a lot about someone? Some critical choices put her in situations of extreme pressure, where the line between success and failure is almost invisible. In those moments, her quick reasoning proves essential, but also exposes fears and insecurities she tries to hide. It's as if every move were a test, not just for others, but for herself, revealing inner limits that rarely surface. And it's in this conflict that the viewer begins to feel empathy for her journey. Have you ever faced moments when every decision seemed to define your future? Rei also faces ethical dilemmas that challenge her morality. Survival demands choices not always aligned with what's right, and that creates constant internal tension. She must balance the logic of survival with her sense of humanity and doesn't always manage to harmonize the two. Those moments reveal her strength of character, but also her hidden vulnerabilities. It's interesting how complex decisions can shape the way we perceive someone, isn't it? The weight of responsibility is another critical factor. She realizes that one wrong choice doesn't just affect herself, but also those around her. That awareness amplifies emotional tension, making each strategic step even more meaningful. And in that process, we see not only her skill, but also the psychological price of being the leader of her own destiny. Have you ever reflected on how responsibility can be both a privilege and a heavy burden? Her adaptability is constantly tested. Unexpected situations demand immediate responses, and there's not always time for detailed planning. In those moments, her vulnerabilities can appear suddenly, but her resilience shines brightly. It's like walking a tightrope without a safety net. Every step is risky, but necessary to move forward. And it's in that balance between risk and control that Rei reveals who she truly is. Can you feel that tension while watching some critical decisions also expose her need to control her environment and the people around her? She realizes that to stay ahead, she must anticipate moves and manage variables most people wouldn't even notice. That makes her strategically powerful, but also emotionally isolated, as not everyone can handle that intensity. It's fascinating how skill and vulnerability can coexist so intricately. Have you noticed how very strategic people sometimes feel lonely? The impact of those choices reflects in her interpersonal relationships. Every decision can draw allies closer or push them away, build trust or spark suspicion. And as she navigates those consequences, we learn more about her resilience and the depth of her strategic thinking. It's as if every decision were a piece of an emotional puzzle that only she can complete. Have you ever felt that your choices shape not just your path, but also the paths of those around you? And, looking at it more broadly, these critical decisions show that Rei is much more than just a cold strategist. Each choice reveals layers of vulnerability, strength, and humanity, making her a complex and captivating character. And even when it seems that everything is under control, there is always a new decision that will challenge her ability to stay firm. This is the kind of tension that keeps the story alive and makes us long for the next move. Behind her firm posture and calculating gaze, Rei carries silent fears that are rarely revealed. Fears of losing control, of trusting the wrong person, or of being betrayed at crucial moments. It is fascinating how someone so strategic can, at the same time, feel vulnerable in the face of unexpected situations. These fears shape every step, every choice, even when no one notices. Have you ever thought about how our deepest fears often determine our actions without us realizing it? The insecurity of not being enough is another constant shadow. Despite her strength and skill, Rei internally questions whether her strategies will really work or if she will be exposed. This silent doubt creates inner tension, making each move not only an external test but also one of self-confidence. And it is at this point that her humanity appears, reminding us that even the strongest have their moments of hesitation. Have you ever felt like you had to prove something to yourself before anyone else? The fear of loss is also a powerful driving force in her life. Losing allies, opportunities, or even control of a situation represents not only a risk, but a deep emotional warning. This constant fear turns her actions into something almost obsessive, always seeking to minimize damage and anticipate problems. It is interesting how fear and strategy can walk side by side, strengthening and restricting at the same time. Have you noticed how fear can be both fuel and brake? Another insecurity lies in how others perceive her. Rei knows that any display of weakness can be exploited, and that creates continuous tension about how she presents herself to the world. Every gesture, every word is carefully calibrated, and even so, there is internal anxiety about how she will be perceived. This constant awareness makes her social interactions an emotional minefield, where even the smallest mistake can be felt intensely. Have you ever caught yourself thinking too much about how others see you? The fear of failing in her strategies also haunts her, even when everything seems under control. She analyzes scenarios, calculates risks, but the internal doubt never completely disappears. This struggle between confidence and insecurity creates moments of palpable tension, where even small slips can seem huge. It is impressive how this combination of talent and fear generates an aura of unpredictability and depth. Have you ever reflected on how our greatest abilities sometimes are born from our greatest anxieties? Emotional loneliness is another delicate point. Although surrounded by people, Rei feels that few can truly understand her, and that reinforces her internal fears. This chosen isolation works as protection but also increases the intensity of her insecurities, making each decision even more charged. And paradoxically, that same loneliness helps her observe, analyze, and act with clarity where others would be lost. Can you imagine the weight of carrying so much awareness in silence? Even with these fears, she finds ways to use her insecurities as an advantage. Each fear becomes an alert. Each doubt becomes motivation to anticipate problems and act with precision. It is almost poetic how her secret vulnerabilities feed her visible strength, making her a character both complex and admirable. And it is in this contrast between fragility and power that the beauty of her psychology lies. Have you noticed how our weaknesses can be secret weapons if well managed? And, in the end, we realize that Rei's fears and insecurities do not define her, they humanize her. They add layers to her personality and explain many of her strategic choices and calculating behaviors. Each hidden fear keeps the story alive, as it makes us reflect on our own inner battles. And while she faces these fears, there is always something greater to come, ready to test her strength once again. Rei does not survive only with physical strength or intelligence. She masters the art of emotional manipulation like no one else. Every word, every gesture is calculated to extract information, test reactions, and create advantage. It is almost like a game of poker, where each facial expression and each silence carries meaning. And the most impressive thing is that this ability seems natural, but in fact, it is the result of years of observation and adaptation. Have you noticed how some people can read you as if they had access to your mind? She also knows how to use others' vulnerability as a strategic tool. By identifying others' fears, insecurities, or desires, she can influence behaviors without anyone realizing it. It is a subtle dance of persuasion and empathy that always puts her one step ahead. This ability to read others' emotions is both fascinating and frightening, revealing how complex her psychology is. Have you ever felt influenced by someone without even realizing it? Rei understands that trust is a valuable and limited currency. She distributes it carefully, building strategic alliances and reinforcing hierarchies without needing to impose authority. This emotional management creates dependence and respect, keeping everyone under her watchful perception. And, interestingly, this ability to manipulate does not make her less human. On the contrary, it shows how survival requires social intelligence. Have you noticed how natural leaders can move people without physical force or imposition? Her survival ability also involves anticipating reactions and possible scenarios. Before acting, she calculates probabilities, observes patterns, and explores weaknesses. This constant analysis is not paranoia. It is emotional training, almost an instinctive defense that turns every situation into an opportunity. It is fascinating to see how she balances tension and strategy, maintaining control even when everything seems chaotic. Have you ever thought about how our mind can become such a powerful survival tool? Rei's emotional manipulation is subtle but effective. She knows when to appear accessible and when to keep her distance, balancing others' perception perfectly. This strategy creates an invisible advantage, allowing her to control dynamics without resorting to direct confrontation. It is almost like watching a conductor leading an orchestra, but each note is a human reaction to be anticipated. Can you imagine the patience and attention required for something like that? Another aspect is her ability to adapt quickly. Unexpected situations require responses that combine observation, empathy, and strategy. Rei can quickly assess others' emotions and adjust her actions to maintain advantage. This flexibility is vital to her survival, showing that emotional intelligence and calculation are not opposites, but complementary. Can you feel how her mind is always on alert, even in the most tense situations? She also uses her own emotions as a control tool. By showing coldness or vulnerability at strategic moments, she influences others' perception and directs behaviors. It is a constant psychological game, where each gesture has multiple meanings and objectives. This ability to turn feelings into strategy shows how complex her survival is. Have you noticed how some people can dominate situations just by the way they present themselves? And finally, we see that these strategies are not just about overcoming immediate challenges. They reflect a long-term survival pattern. Rei turns each interaction, each observation, and each emotion into learning, always seeking to maximize control and minimize risks. This mastery of emotional manipulation is what keeps her one step ahead, ready for any challenge that may arise. And of course, that opens space for the next conflicts that will test her intelligence and resilience even more. Throughout the season, Rei shows an evolution that goes beyond strategic skills. We see her emotional complexity grow along with her perception of the world. She learns from each challenge, each mistake, and each victory, turning experiences into constant learning. This evolution is not linear, full of ups and downs, but it is precisely that which makes her fascinating. It is like watching someone learn to walk on tightropes while carrying invisible baggage. Have you noticed how true evolution always comes with deep challenges? Interactions with other characters are catalysts for this evolution. Conflicts, alliances, and betrayals force her to rethink strategies, adjust behaviors, and deal with repressed emotions. Each complicated situation is an opportunity for growth, and she does not hesitate to learn from mistakes or exposed vulnerabilities. This ability to adapt is the key that turns trauma into strength. Can you imagine yourself growing this way, learning from every difficulty? Her evolution also involves self-knowledge. She begins to understand her own motivations, fears, and desires better, recognizing patterns that were once unconscious. This inner insight allows her to make more assertive decisions and deal better with internal conflicts. And, although the world around her remains chaotic, the feeling is that she becomes increasingly in control of herself. Isn't it interesting how self-knowledge changes the way we face challenges? Rei also shows greater ability to balance vulnerability and control. Before, her emotions were often hidden or repressed. Now she begins to recognize that showing humanity does not necessarily weaken her position. This emotional evolution allows for more genuine connections without losing strategic advantage. It is like learning to dance between trust and caution, keeping balance even in unstable situations. Have you ever felt that emotional maturity changes the way you deal with the world? Another striking point is the growth of her resilience. Each obstacle, each threat reinforces her ability to face adversity without breaking. And it is not just about resisting, it is about adapting, anticipating, and turning each challenge into learning or advantage. This silent resilience becomes a central trait, shaping her decisions and attitudes. Have you noticed how some people seem stronger after every difficulty they face? The evolution also reflects in her leadership and influence over others. She learns to balance manipulation and empathy, becoming a respected and feared figure at the same time. This combination of social and strategic skills results from personal growth and constant observation. And as she develops, we realize that her strength does not come only from tactical skills, but from her refined emotional intelligence. Have you noticed how true leadership depends on more than command? In addition, Rei begins to better understand the importance of timing and patience. Before, impulses and quick decisions were guided by instinct. Now she can measure the right moment to act, weighing risks and opportunities. This maturity turns each action into something much more calculated and efficient without losing the ability to improvise when necessary. And it is in this balance between calculation and intuition that we see the true evolution of the character. Have you ever thought about how patience and timing change outcomes? And, at the end of the season, we see a Rei who is not only more strategic or stronger, but more self-aware and conscious of her surroundings. Her evolution does not erase her traumas or fears, but integrates them as part of her complexity, making her an even more fascinating character. And even with all her growth, there will always be new challenges that will test everything she has learned, paving the way for even more intriguing stories. We can hardly wait to see what comes next. At Rei's psychological climax, we witness the fusion of all the layers that define her: intelligence, vulnerability, strategies, and fears. Every experience she has lived manifests in her choices, revealing not only who she is, but also how she deals with the complexity of the world around her. It is like observing a human mosaic, where each piece is essential to the whole. And, interestingly, this complexity makes her even more fascinating and unpredictable. Have you ever reflected on how experiences shape not only actions but essence? She represents the constant struggle between control and humanity. No matter how much she dominates situations, there are still moments when emotions flow, reminding us that no one is invulnerable. This balance between rationality and emotion is what connects us to her as spectators, showing that even the strongest carry fragilities. It is in this tension that the narrative becomes richer and more engaging, because we see ourselves reflected in her choices. Can you identify with this inner battle? Rei also symbolizes the power of self-knowledge combined with experience. Every trauma, fear, or mistake is transformed into learning, strengthening her without erasing her humanity. It is almost poetic how she manages to balance strength and vulnerability, becoming a more complete version of herself. This psychological maturity not only strengthens her, but inspires reflection on how we face our own challenges. Have you ever thought about how you could turn difficulties into strategic learning? Her psychological climax highlights the complexity of human morality, survival, ethics, and necessity intertwine in her decisions, showing that the line between right and wrong is not always clear. And it is precisely this ambiguity that captivates us because it forces us to question how we would react under the same circumstances. It is fascinating to observe how the narrative exposes dilemmas that are universal, even in an extreme universe like that of Alice in Borderland. Have you ever caught yourself questioning your own decisions like that? Rei's evolution also teaches us about resilience and adaptation. Even after losses and frustrations, she finds ways to reinvent herself and move forward without losing her essence. This capacity for psychological recovery is a powerful reminder that real growth is born from overcoming adversity. And at this point, she ceases to be just a fictional character, becoming an example of emotional intelligence and strategic strength. Have you ever reflected on how resilience shapes our journey? At the peak of her journey, we see that her emotional manipulation and strategy are not just survival tactics, but ways of understanding and connecting with the world. Each move reveals not only calculation, but also deep perception of human nature. It is a reminder that our actions are always shaped by experience, emotion, and intention. And this understanding makes us admire her complexity even more. Have you noticed how careful observation can become a powerful weapon in life? Rei's psychological climax also challenges the viewer to reflect on identity and purpose. Who she is cannot be reduced to skills or achievements. It is the sum of choices, traumas, and adaptations that make her unique. And by following her journey, we are invited to look at our own lives and think about how we respond to challenges and fears. This introspection is one of the greatest treasures that the narrative offers. Do you feel this sense of provocation while watching her journey? And finally, we realize that Rei is not just an example of strategy or strength, but a deep study of the human condition. Her path shows that intelligence, vulnerability, fear, and courage coexist, shaping a being capable of adapting, learning, and evolving constantly. And even when everything seems resolved, the feeling is that there is always more to discover, new tests, and new lessons. And it is exactly this continuity that keeps us eager for the next chapter. So, what did you think about diving into Rei's mind? Were you able to connect with her fears, strategies, and dilemmas? Or did you notice something new about how we deal with our own vulnerabilities? Tell us in the comments, which character do you want me to analyze next time? Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you can keep learning about complex characters and discover the secrets behind the stories everyone thinks they know. Let's go together on this journey to understand what lies behind the mask.